Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. Welcome everyone. This is the May 2024 edition of the City of Somerville's Commission on Energy Use and Climate Change. Excited for tonight's topic. This should be fun. Really, it should be fun. And so we will typically start with some introductions. So let's go around for the commissioners first, then the city staff, and then I'd love to have attendees introduce themselves as well. No lengthy check-in question, just your name, where you live in Somerville, or your role in the city of Somerville, and we'll go from there. I'm Larry Yu. I serve on the commission, and I live in the Davis Square area. Harry, how about you?
Hi, Eri Furusawa. I'm also a commissioner. I live in the Davis Square area also. Courtney, you want to go?
Sure. Courtney Coslow, commissioner in Ward 5, Magoon Square, and affordable housing developer. Alexis?
Hi everyone, Alexis Washburn, commissioner, and I live in the Teal Square area. Julia, do you want to go next? Or Larry, I'll let you facilitate.
Nope, that's perfect. Go for it, Julia.
Oh, sorry. Julia Damiana. I am environmental policy manager with the Office of Sustainability and Environment. I do not live in Somerville, but I am happy to be able to work for such a great city. And I will kick it off. Are there any commissioners who haven't introduced themselves yet?
Nope.
No? All right. In that case, I will kick it off to Emily.
Hi everyone, my name is Emily Sullivan. I'm the Climate Change Program Manager in the Office of Sustainability and Environment, and I'll pass it to Eric.
Hi, I am Eric Larson. I'm the Energy Manager for the city, and I am also out of the Office of Sustainability and Environment. Naomi?
Hello everyone, I'm Naomi Gross. I'm the Community Engagement Specialist for the same office. And unfortunately, I don't live in Somerville, but that might change soon. And I can pass it off to Director Raich.
You're
on mute.
Oh, two buttons. Richard Raich, Director of Infrastructure and Asset Management for the City of Somerville. I am also a Ward 7 resident. I can't see to pass it off to anybody, so someone select for me, please.
I will hand it to Jason.
Hi everyone, it's an honor to be here. My name is Jason Behrens. I grew up in Somerville, went to school in Somerville, and now I work in Somerville. I work for Somerville Public Schools. I'm out of the curriculum department. I'm an innovation specialist, and I'm co-facilitating the climate change curriculum committee, which has brought me to you all. This is wonderful. Thanks for having me.
Fabulous. Thank you, Jason. I think that's everyone on screen. Julia, would you do the honors of walking through the 6 attendees and just asking them to introduce themselves?
Absolutely. So I'm just going to go down the list that I have the participants, and we're going to start off with Anna Gibson. So Anna, I'm going to allow you to talk.
Hello, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hey everyone, my name is Anna Gibson. I live in Somerville on the Somerville side of Inman Square.
Thank you so much. All right, next up, Corey, you should be allowed to talk now.
Hi everyone, my name is Corey Donahue. Good to see you. I live in Inman Square.
Thank you very much. Next, Emily.
Hi everyone, my name is Emily Hart. I live in the Teal Square area, and I'm in Somerville Mothers Out Front, and I have a child at the Healy School.
Thank you so much. Next, we have Malcolm.
Hi everyone, my name is Malcolm Sherman Godfrey. I live in Ward 5, just by Ball Square. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. And last but not least, we have Patrick. So you should be able to unmute yourself now too.
Hi, Patrick Baylog. I'm not a Somerville resident, but I'm a climate organizer and interested in this work.
And Julia, I believe that we skipped Lindsay.
Yeah, you missed Lindsay.
Oh. Well, in that case, now last but not least, Lindsay, you should be able to unmute yourself.
There we go. I'm
Sorry about
Lindsay
that.
Luke. Lindsay Luke with Mothers Out Front. I did wonder how I ended up being last, but anyway, whatever. And I am interested in talking with you all about how the council's resolution about supporting the climate action bills proposed before the Senate will affect you all, because the council has made some very clear expression of preferences, and I wonder how that affects the world. So, thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Lindsay. Certainly not least. So sorry about that. So tonight we are going to kick off with a presentation from some folks. I think Corey, you are leading this charge. Is that correct? We'll bring you off of mute. And if there's, let us know if there's anyone else who is co-presenting with you.
Yeah, it's I think mainly me. So yeah, just me.
Okay. We will see if we can get your video activated. I'm not sure that we can, but in the meantime, I think Julia will share the slides and you could just beep whenever you'd like the slide to advance.
Sure.
Bear with me.
Yeah. In the meantime, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, Corey, just so to get you on camera, while you give the presentation, I'm going to promote you as a panelist, and then afterwards I'll move you back to the attendees. All right?
Right. Excited for the honor.
All right, Corey, you should be able to turn your webcam on now.
Okay. Great. Thank you. And so, Julia, are you going to share your screen to advance the slides? Yes.
Here we go.
Great. I will
Let's get the
let you
presentation
know when to
started.
go forward.
Absolutely.
Great. So thank you all. Really appreciate having the time to talk about the Green New Deal for Somerville Public Schools campaign. Again, my name is Corey Donahue. I'm a resident of Somerville. I've worked in education my whole career, also deeply interested in climate change advocacy work. And so at the intersection of these is the ways in which we might advocate for greener schools and schools more committed to climate change advocacy work in Somerville. So this is a Green New Deal for Somerville Public Schools campaign that we've been working on for the last maybe 6 to 9 months or so, but comes from a long history of advocacy in Somerville for environmentally sound and green schools. You can go to the next slide. What we'll be talking about today is first just an opportunity for people to learn what a Green New Deal for Somerville Public Schools could look like. So I'll have maybe 10 to 15 minutes of slides to go through. And then some questions at the end. And I'd love to hear from commissioners, from the city, from the public on how the city can advance a green future for Somerville schools. So the rest of our time will be devoted to that, both questions that we're posing to commissioners in the city and any questions that people have about our campaign. The next slide, you'll see who this group is composed of. So there's a group of citizens making up this Green New Deal for Somerville Public Schools campaign, as well as another group called the Somerville Carbon Free and Healthy Schools Coalition, which consists of parents from the Winter Hill and Brown schools, as well as some educators and people with real expertise in things like building science and energy efficiency within buildings. The Somerville Educators Union has been involved in this campaign as well and has long advocated for climate change related provisions in the work of schools. 350 Mass and Somerville Mothers Out Front, who there are a couple members from the public here today, have also joined in this work and helped advocate for this as well. And this is also part of a broader Massachusetts effort to make schools more climate resilient, less carbon polluting. And this group, the Massachusetts Climate Resilient Schools Coalition, has also supported this campaign. On the next slide, you'll see why we're here. So Somerville Public Schools are the largest municipal source of carbon emissions in Somerville, something that has been emphasized in a couple of the greenhouse gas emission inventories from the city. There's something 60 to 65% of Somerville's municipal emissions are coming from schools. And we know our schools need significant upgrades. We saw this from the Winter Hill School. We've seen this from a number of other schools, and half of which are built from the 70s or earlier. Even the newest buildings are not carbon neutral. The high school, just opening a handful of years ago, continues to use natural gas in its HVAC systems. And despite some general goals, which I'll talk about later as president of the Climate Forward Plan, the city hasn't yet made concrete commitments or a concrete plan to the kind of environmental standards for its school buildings. And the bottom line is that we want cleaner, safer, healthier schools. On the next slide, you'll see this is kind of part of a broader effort, as I mentioned earlier in the list of people who have been involved in this campaign. Parents throughout the country, including in Somerville, have long advocated for improvements in school buildings, both the quality of the buildings and their contributions to global warming. Teachers have also long demanded change, and Somerville Educators Union negotiated in its contract for certain provisions related to climate change, including the climate change curriculum that Jason referenced earlier, as well as for city commitments to decarbonizing school buildings. And then students and young people throughout the country, as seen in the Sunrise movement, including a Somerville High School Sunrise chapter, have long been fighting for a Green New Deal, a lot of which starts with schools. Next slide. Also just want to emphasize that there have been other successful campaigns throughout the country related to this work. In Denver, a student-led campaign led to concessions from the school board and has created a model in many ways, including tools that can be used by school districts and communities across the country. LA, through a Green New Deal for Public Schools campaign, has gotten to commitments to installation on half of all the rooftop real estate of solar panels, solar arrays, within the next few years. Even Watertown nearby, from community advocacy, is opening up a new zero carbon high school that I believe is the first LEED Platinum. It's like a LEED Platinum 4.0 and net zero energy school in the US. So there's other campaigns that we can build off of in this kind of work and that have provided models for what we're working towards. On the next slide, you'll see the high level goal, which is, I'll just read it out. Within 10 years, all Somerville students, regardless of where they live, receive world-class educational programming in buildings that use zero fossil fuels and meet the highest of energy efficiency standards. In summary, we want students to go to schools that are designed with the future in mind. And yes, you can go to the next slide that shows some of the major components of this Green New Deal campaign. A lot of it, and I'll talk a bit more in a moment, is around building decarbonization and energy efficiency upgrades. It's something that the city has control over and I think can make some concrete commitments and plans in terms of reducing the carbon emissions of, and it's the biggest source of carbon emissions from school buildings, from schooling in general. The climate change curriculum is something that we hear from students and parents often in terms of teaching children about climate change and getting them involved in projects that might reduce climate change or at the very least raise awareness of the dangers of climate change. Carbon-free and electric transportation options feel very important. I know the city contracts out its kind of busing program, but commitments to public transportation, biking, things like that are again something that residents in Somerville continue to bring up, as well as the sustainability of school lunches. I know that in the Climate Forward Plan, there is a lot of detail about plans to have less carbon intensive school lunch options, which is very exciting, and is something that students especially have brought up a lot in their desire for this work. And lastly, just in general, reducing waste, adding composting in schools. I'll also add, somewhat relatedly, the use of green space for things like gardens is really important in helping people continue to build connection to nature, to the impacts of climate and climate change in the community. Next slide. Just to talk a little bit more about building decarbonization. There are a couple of people here who I'm sure could say much more about this than myself, but in general, the kind of things that we're talking about include the use of heat pumps in place of gas or oil-powered HVAC systems. I'll also say like geothermal as a use of energy to heat and cool school buildings. But not only that, the actual whole building envelope, insulation and air sealing helps reduce energy loss. You can have incredibly advanced HVAC systems in the school, and yet if all the heat or cool air is being lost, then you're still wasting a lot of energy. Solar panel installation or solar arrays on or around school buildings is also critical here. And lastly, ensuring that the source of energy, otherwise the electricity, is coming from clean energy sources, are the kind of things that we're talking about when we mean building decarbonization. Next slide. What we're really specifically asking for from the city is commitments regarding new school buildings. As we know, the Winter Hill School and maybe Brown School, I should say, are being rebuilt in the next few years. And commitments around the use of zero carbon, I think are likely easily made, but the kind of environmental standards that we want to see in new school buildings, there's ranges that can be made. And so having the city commit to bold environmental standards for all new buildings is something that we're looking for. When it comes to existing buildings, I think a clear timeline, a clear plan for how those buildings might receive comprehensive retrofits that are prioritizing decarbonization is the next thing that we're looking for. Ultimately, full transparency from the city means by which the members of the public could hold the city accountable to goals that are not necessarily general, but very specific, and updating the city on the progress of those goals. In addition, I think like funded positions to actually work exclusively on this work so that it's not necessarily falling between the cracks of city departments and or is kind of put on top of people's already full work schedules to focus exclusively on school building decarbonization is something we'd also like to see. On the next slide, you'll see just some reflections on how the Climate Forward plan has allowed some updates that we think are really exciting. So from a high-level strategy that explicitly names reducing greenhouse gas emissions associated with city buildings, school buildings, and purchases, there are sub-actions that are related exactly to this work when it comes to emissions and renewable energy standards for all buildings, embodied carbon thresholds for concrete and steel, which has a detailed implementation blueprint that kind of nicely outlines the clear plan to get there. Vehicle purchasing policies related to city and school-owned vehicles. This action I referenced earlier in terms of offering plant-based options for meals in Somerville Public Schools with a detailed blueprint, I think is very exciting work. As well as a couple others that I can skip past. But just to say that there's a lot of good things in the Climate Forward plan that indicate general commitments to this kind of work, including a couple actions that I think we're really appreciating have really detailed plans for that indicate like full commitment to moving forward from them for them. On the next slide, we're also listing just what we think are some shortcomings, which is ultimately that there's not a concrete plan or timeline for how and when the city is going to reduce carbon emissions from school buildings. Although there is this broad commitment, the kind of thing that we're looking for are specific goals and targets. The related targets in the Climate Forward Plan are things like the number of city and school net zero buildings constructed or renovated just simply says will increase by 2030, 2040, 2050. By 2050, today's kindergartners will be having kids in schools themselves. And that just feels like it is not yet aggressive enough and clear enough about what we're trying to do in our school buildings. And so we're looking for a clear plan and a clear timeline. Related to this, we have heard how while the city's Department of Infrastructure and Asset Management, along with the Office of Sustainability and the Environment, tries to maximize decarbonization in their work, there is not yet any strategic plan to proactively decarbonize, and would require a plan and a study that the Department of Infrastructure and Asset Management has said that they don't yet have funding for. And so we've advocated for specific budget requests in the Somerville's FY25 budget that include a feasibility study and master plan, and a specific project manager role, speaking to the idea of having someone specifically devoted to this work. Both of these have received support from city councilors and their individual budget requests of the mayor, and we're hoping to see those in the upcoming budget to be presented to the city council. Within the slides, there's more specific links to, or I'm sorry, there's links to more details on those two specific budget requests. On the next slide is also just an indication that the city council and school committee are passing resolutions in support of this work. So the city council last week passed a resolution. The school committee is going to be reviewing a resolution that are endorsing the kind of bold, immediate action that we're looking for, including this idea of a comprehensive study with a 10-year plan for decarbonization of school buildings, as well as other things, including assessing, monitoring, and maintaining the healthfulness of schools' physical environment. So how hot or cold is the school building? What is the indoor air quality like to ensure that students can learn in the best setting for them? And then requests to report annually updates on the school's healthfulness and physical environment. So what we have here are just some questions I'd love to pose to the commission and the city about what opportunities exist for the city strengthening its plans for Somerville schools, what barriers exist to rapid implementation of the Climate Forward Plan, especially those that are related to schools. How might the commission continue to advocate for this work? And also how this Green New Deal for Somerville Public Schools could try to redress inequities by empowering people from marginalized backgrounds, creating opportunities for union labor. Two more slides here. One, just to name that if anyone from the public is interested in getting involved, we encourage people to talk about this campaign with a friend who wants to see a greener future in Somerville. People don't know about just how about the state of Somerville school buildings and the opportunity that exists to reduce carbon emissions from them. We have a QR code on the last slide that could help people join the mailing list. And then there's more opportunities to help us continue to advocate. So appreciate just leaving this up for, well, that's okay. And maybe we can go back to those questions at the very least that people can, I'd be curious to hear the commission's reflections on. Although of course I can first take any clarifying questions or any questions from commission, city, or the public.
Commissioner Koslow, I see your hand up.
Sure, you that okay. Thank you, Corey. I really appreciate you presenting all of this. And if I may, before we get into the questions, I wanted to add a few more kind of additional finer point on some of all of this great information that Corey that you shared with us. And one is to say our climate forward plan, which we had this great launch of, and it, is a really forward-thinking really product that we should be really proud to have here, kind of does still miss this point a bit, not more than a bit. So, you know, we know that it talks about in the Climate Forward plan how through all the work that the staff at OSC has done, that 63% of the citywide carbon emission comes from buildings, and 78% of municipal carbon emissions come from municipal buildings, 2/3 of which are schools. And the commitments that we've made to school buildings, particularly, I think new school buildings in New Winter Hill and whether it's Brown, are going to meet our goals, because the new stretch code that we have in Somerville will make this in your passive house super tight building. The mayor has agreed or stated at the Climate Forward event, update event, that all new buildings will be all electric. So I think we're going to have a fantastic building there. There are always some things we could push more for around, you know, low carbon and embodied carbon materials, but that's also in the plan. So I think that's great. But the existing buildings, you know, there's a leadership goal in the climate plan that Somerville as a city needs to take a leadership role, but there really is only a small reference to the existing school buildings. And so two pieces there. One, students spend most of their childhood in these school buildings, and their health is greatly impacted by the quality of the air and the conditions in the buildings. And so we really need, and by its nature, when you do a whole building decarbonization, when you don't just think of one piece, like we need a new mechanical system, we need new windows, but you look at the whole building and you assess how tight can I make this building so I could have the smallest electrical system possible to heat and cool this building. And when you do that, you automatically put in energy recovery ventilators. It's a fresh air exchange that also has really great filtration and creates wonderful indoor air quality experiences for our students and educators in there. So there's this other impact that is huge. So right now, there isn't a plan. The city has a capital plan for how to improve school buildings over time, and then we get to emergency situations. So we saw it at the Winter Hill School building that had to suddenly close because of years of not putting money into it and then trying to catch up with new windows and roofs, but it was too late. And so now we have other buildings that weren't built quite as long ago, but we're putting in new mechanical systems because they're failing. And maybe they'll be all electric, but they're going to be huge systems if we're not also making the buildings tighter now. And so if we're not thinking about the whole building and making it tighter now, we lose our entire ability in the future to do the tightness because we've just spent all this money on this new mechanical system. And so we're not going to, it's going to be another 20, 30 years before we're going to want to, or maybe more, because those systems last a long time. And they're going to be really inefficient and really expensive, because in this climate, in this part of the country, gas right now is less expensive than electricity, and electrical buildings are only going to be cost effective if they're also airtight at the same time. And there are ways to do this with students in there. You can wrap buildings on the outside. There are systems that exist that could work with the constraints of you can't close buildings because there's no place for the students to go. So all that to say, it is really critical if we're going as a commission in a city to really meet the goals that we're setting out. We're not going to make our climate forward goals if we're not focused on this. And we're also doing a disservice to our students. And if you think about what this could create with indoor air quality and the curriculum impacts of it, that these buildings will be living curriculum that they'll be in and be able to study. I could picture like little cutouts of the wall assembly, you know, in a little like under a little plexiglass from the inside, so they could see how that goes, and like lots of different educational opportunities. And I'm really excited, Jason, that you're here, because I know that's something that you're in your role, you're able to do and help focus on. So I just adding that to Corey's, that's my little soapbox. So thank you.
Thank you, Courtney. I would be surprised if you got any argument from my fellow commissioners. I don't want to speak on their behalf. Totally agree, and Corey as well. Thank you for that presentation, and for the and frankly, for having some very practical handholds in here, which I think are important, like, city staffing for project manager and a period of time for planning, for example, and which I think I have been guilty of skipping over sometimes in my own advocacy. So I appreciate that. Just open it up to first to other commissioners for comment, and I'd love to bring city staff in as well. And you are not required to comment at this point, so that's perfect.
I'll unmute myself. Hi, Corey, Eliza Johnston, Commissioner. I apologize for missing the presentation, but I was just skimming through the slide deck. So thank you again, and I really echo what Courtney, what Commissioner shared. I guess I did have a question, and I'm sorry again if you covered this. Given all of the bill and IRA and sort of other funding sources that are out there right now, did you talk at all about funding opportunities?
No, I didn't. And so appreciate you mentioning that. Yes, there are a lot of funding opportunities. The organization Undaunted K-12 is a great resource for the kinds of ways that cities, especially in Massachusetts, can take advantage of the many federal and state funding opportunities that exist, both for new school construction in its use of things like geothermal, and in the retrofitting of existing school buildings. And so there's a lot out there. I'm not an expert and wouldn't claim to be, but would point people to the Sarah Ross from Undaunted K-12 gave a presentation to the School Building Facilities and Maintenance Special Committee that is a joint city council and school committee, and talked at length about the number of opportunities that exist. But it's well worth raising, and a lot of her major takeaways are just that it is significantly less expensive for cities in the long run, and even at times in some upfront costs to be building using things like geothermal and heat pumps in its school construction and retrofitting. As Commissioner Koslow was mentioning earlier, the kind of savings that can come from electricity are especially important if the building envelope is sealed and energy is not kind of lost outside of the building. But yeah, all that's just to say, thank you for asking the question. It is, there's lots of financial incentives for doing this, as well as the kind of incentives for reducing carbon emissions and having safer schools for children themselves.
Great.
And if I could add to that too, this could actually end up being less expensive than a traditional approach for a couple of reasons. One, because of all the incentives that exist from the Inflation Reduction Act and similar legislation that has passed, and it's not competitive funds. It's not that we have to fight for it, and if we don't get it, we're giving up something else. It's on the table as much as this could be used. And then also, if you do this, make these decisions at the beginning that you're not going to just replace a mechanical system, but look at the whole building overall. You save these approaches don't have to be more expensive if you do them in the right order and not try to retrofit afterwards. Plus, you then if you make a building airtight and you could put a smaller mechanical system, those come with air conditioning embedded in it. So you're basically getting air conditioning for free. Or you could say it's less expensive if you already are going to include the cost of air conditioning. And we know, given where our climate zone is now, that is a necessary part of our schools.
Great. Well, thank you both for that. I think, what I've heard to be the argument or the sort of concern about, taking these sort of bolder green initiatives is around funding. And my understanding is that can be addressed, or at least, there are opportunities to get some of the money. So thank you.
Yeah, I'll add two things to that. I mean, one is there's like, you can look at life cycle costs, and then you have to square that against how municipal capital budgeting works, which might be a different kind of animal. So it might require a little creativity to get there, but I appreciate that. I was also going to mention, I know I see Eric just walked away, but I was also going to mention, like, we have there it is. We have a revolving fund too that is modestly capitalized, and I imagine that some of this work could be done out of that revolving fund if it were more capitalized. But I could be off base with that. I'd be curious to hear what city thinks about that. I forgot what it's formally called, but it's some sort of energy efficiency.
Are you referring to the Energy Stabilization Fund that the OSE controls? It's right now. There's the funding in that that is going to go towards some of these measures, but at the moment it's being replenished at, it's maybe $500,000 next year. So that's, that certainly gets us part of the way, but it's not, some of these measures that we're talking about. I think that if we want to do the overcladding on one of the schools, it's going to cost more than that, and so it certainly is going to help, but I don't think it's going to be a primary funding source for most of these projects.
Anything else from commissioners? Any city staff want to jump in? I'm curious for your thoughts as well.
Can I ask two related questions? Sorry, and then I'd love to hear from the city team. First of all, Corey, thank you so much for bringing this important conversation to this, and for taking time 7 p.m. on a weekday to do this. You talked about union labor, and I'm just curious about within your coalition or in the conversations that you've been having, what discussions you've had regarding like the labor part of this. And so often the times when we talk about this and decarb and energy efficiency, I think one of the challenges that we run into in addition to the money piece is just who has the technical capacity and skills and training to do this work at the speed and scale that this deserves. And I think this gets to your fourth bullet point exactly about like, how can we make this an opportunity to train up people, because this is an industry that's going to only scale and grow. So I'm curious about the conversation that you've had there. And then relatedly also to your fourth bullet, within your coalition or within the people and allies you've been talking to, what has been the things that you've heard from communities of color in Somerville, immigrant communities, other people who are bearing the brunt of this, and what has their specific demands, if any, have you heard as you're putting together this really strong argument?
Yeah, thank you for your questions, and appreciate directing to that one. To the first one around labor, I mean, I think there's two things. One is the labor union of the Somerville Educators Union, and the ways that the SEU has been fighting for this work. In the last contract negotiation, I mentioned earlier, the SEU prioritized requesting and bargained with the school committee on the school committee working with the city to decarbonize its school buildings, and was able to get general commitments, and yet is looking for more aggressive action from the city in terms of improving the quality of its school buildings in general, and reducing their contribution to climate change. And so that continues to be something that the SEU cares about, and I think would be centrally involved in this work. If I'm remembering correctly, the language that we included in the resolution and or the budget request about conducting a team for this work would also involve educators and their perspective on this. And as you know, Jason is here and working on and knows well, the educators are a central part to things like climate change curriculum being introduced in school buildings. So the labor certainly involves the SEU, but then of course, like building trades, the Somerville Municipal Employees Association likely involved in this work in some way as well. And I think trying to ensure that the work that is being advanced and the kind of decarbonization efforts are in support of these kind of labor groups feels important for the city. And so labor members and advocates have wanted us to continue, I think rightfully, to press the city on trying to use union labor in the decarbonization efforts. And so when considering the construction of these buildings, how it can help support, not undermine working class folks. When it comes to empowering people from marginalized backgrounds, I mean, there's a number of different interests and priorities in, you mentioned immigrant groups and others in terms of the schooling of their kids, but we know, I can't say in Somerville for sure, but throughout the country, there's lots of data on the ways in which school building quality is pretty closely associated with surrounding socioeconomic status and income and race and ethnicity, and legal citizen status in the country. And so ensuring that in this work, we're prioritizing the kind of schools that might otherwise get overlooked feels like one way that we're doing this. And I think like clear timelines and plans are one way to ensure that the city is committed to this work, not just for those schools that might otherwise have the most like political capital from surrounding communities. So I think those are just a couple ways. Yeah, sorry.
I want to add to that. And I should have said at the beginning that I am also, in addition to being a commissioner, I'm part of the Somerville Carbon Free and Healthy Schools Coalition. So that's part of why I'm kind of piggybacking off of some of what Corey has said here. But I also want to add that Padres Latinos members are part of the coalition and have said a few things specifically that I've heard from that group, is that they want to make sure that future job training skills in the climate related fields are a really big part of what we're talking about here. So it's, you know, using the building as a source, but also to make sure we're then leading people onto paths that could be high quality paying jobs. So that's one thing that we've heard, as well as the indoor air quality being a big concern, especially as lower income people often live in buildings that already don't have great air quality, and then their schools are often the ones that are less further along. Not always the case here, but I think it's something that I've heard a lot of concern about that as well.
This part of the agenda was scheduled to run to 7:50 p.m. I'm keen to keep it open for 5 or 10 minutes longer. However, if there's more discussion, and Emily is about to jump in.
Sure. Hey, well, thanks, Corey, and everyone else who worked on the comments about Climate Forward. Thanks for acknowledging successes and shortcomings. You know, and for your involvement, like I guess in the update process, that was really helpful. Well, I guess I hear and agree with everything that you said in terms of maybe things that aren't in the Climate Forward plan, like more concrete timelines and maybe commitments for some of these things. And the I think, you know, I guess the way that I'd phrase it is like Climate Forward is a community climate action plan, and it's not a decarbonization roadmap, right? So I think that content is something that we would create in a decarbonization roadmap for city and school buildings, which is exciting. And I know that Eric, in the work that he's doing, is like applying for the city to participate in the state's Green Communities Climate Leaders Program. And so having a decarbonization roadmap, Eric, is it a criteria for or eligibility? Like they're connected somehow. So I don't know what that timeline is. So I'm sorry to say that, but I think it's something the city will be doing. Eric?
Yeah, the decarbonization, the building decarbonization roadmap is a requirement for the Climate Leaders Program. I think that the requirements to get into the program are not extensive, and so the form of that report that we are looking for is going to be more in depth than what is going to be going into that report. But it is going to be we can work off of. I don't believe that the one that I'm creating for getting into that program is going to include deep ASHRAE level audits, etc. I don't think that it doesn't go quite that in depth, and that's certainly something that we're looking at and something that we're interested in. The Climate Leaders Program is going to be very useful in that through Green Communities we've gotten funding for many of the energy efficiency programs we've gotten over the years, and the Climate Leaders Program is not as focused on energy efficiency as much as decarbonization, and that's there's a little bit of a difference there, and all of the funding opportunities are going to be larger than the ones that are available in Green Communities, right? So they're talking about they haven't actually written those yet. I actually was in a meeting today where they were talking about it again, saying we still haven't written those, but they're all going to be around $1 million, if not more. They say that they're all going to be larger than the largest one that they've ever done for Green Communities, which is $500,000. So we're really looking forward to leveraging those funds as well once we get into the program. And then that decarbonization roadmap, like I said, a great framework for something that's going to be used by ISD, etc. So.
Yeah, I mean, to make the same caveat that Courtney made, in my professional hat, ICF provides the technical assistance for DOER's Climate Leaders and the new decarb program that's being launched. So I can say, the program is sort of evolving based on the demand, and so part of what they part of DOER's strategy, if you think about this as sort of Green Communities 2.0 for the communities that have, a little bit more of a savvy approach, they want to make sure that the program is, suitable for the Somervilles and Cambridges and Arlingtons, but also for the communities that are much smaller and don't have the capacity and sort of professional staff that we do, and figuring out that right balance of how to sort of pull everyone up, but still offer something that's competitive and productive for, I would say the communities that are further along, like ours. Thank you to Eric and other city staff on this call, is where they're trying to find that right balance. So I think both that and then the new decarb TA that's rolling out in the next couple of months, I think is going to be a great opportunity to tap into some of that funding.
And we have been awarded one of those TA studies to help us create that framework, and I am very excited to get into that process. And I wasn't meaning to diminish the efforts that are going to
No.
I'm very excited about it, but
I didn't think you were. I was just sort of explaining that, it's hard to sort of right size these state programs, knowing that you've got, Somerset and Somerville and,
I imagine that as part of with this active community, when we get done with the decarbonization roadmap that is going to be part of the climate action or the Climate Leaders Program, that we should be able to make that public. I mean, I think it will be public, in which case, people are going to see it and say, well, we're looking for more. Well, we're also looking for more, and we will be developing it. I think that when we discussed it with Power Options and a few of the other groups that are offering us services, their description of it just was not quite as in depth as we were hoping for. And like I said, it's great for what it's going to be used for, and it is going to be a roadmap. Well, it's by definition by its name, I suppose. But you know, we're going to use it to develop you know, further studies.
I appreciate the different forms that this kind of plan could take. I mean, I good to hear, Emily, about the kind of limited scope of the climate forward plan. I do see within it like the kind of implementation blueprints that do feel like a bit more of those specific details that you could imagine for this. And Eric, I'm hearing the decarbonization roadmap is one means by which there's at least some more detail, but that there also might be shortcomings to that form. And so I guess I'm just continuing as kind of like the bottom line to advocate for a plan in some form that offers the kind of level of detail that we're speaking to, which I know I'm seeing you nod, and I you know, understand that that's part of it, and might take different forms, but hopefully is something that we can get to relatively soon. And I understand that there likely need to be kind of studies on the work of proactively decarbonizing before something like that plan can be released. But even just a timeline for when a more comprehensive plan would be released, I think would also be helpful to know.
Rich, want to jump in?
Yeah, as long as I'm here, I'll take the opportunity to speak, and maybe give some advice on how both the commission and the various advocacy groups can focus their energy in ways that at least I think maybe have more influence. The first is, as you may know, we are in the final weeks of preparing the municipal budget. You might hear that the financial forecast for fiscal 25 does not project as much growth as we have had in the recent, well, I'll even say decade. And so new programs being funded will be fewer than have been in the past few years. So there's a lot of competition this year. I certainly am advocating for a lot of the things that are you know, being promoted here for IAM to take on in fiscal 25 and beyond. There's going to be a lot of competition. So, you know, and the resolution passed by City Council last week was helpful. I forwarded that on to the budget team and said, hey, look, City Council's getting out ahead. Let's let's do it. So, you know, to whatever degree in the next few days or so, if voices could be heard that, you know, this is a priority from a wide range, and that, you know, these are the sorts of things that, you know, that a real study and a real plan for decarbonization of the schools that IAM would lead. You know, I think that sort of advocacy in the short term would be very helpful. The second, and, you know, sort of thinking, you know, to the, you know, longer term in the implementation, you know, while Courtney's right, there are Commissioner Kozlow is correct, that, you know, there are some things we can do with the buildings occupied really to make a lot of the advances on this, and some meaningful changes in the buildings. We can't have them fully occupied. You know, and it gives us a logistics challenge to be able to do this on 7 schools without any swing space, because I think, as you know, everyone knows, we had to close the Winter Hill, and the Winter Hill is currently inhabiting the Edgerly building, which has been historically our swing space. Anytime we do work on a school, we put students in the Edgerly. We don't have that right now. So to think about really making significant progress in the other 7 schools, we need to free up that swing space, which means a resolution of the Winter Hill and the Brown problems, and how Brown gets solved also would have an implication on how soon we can identify those other schools. So, you know, we are starting up, and we'll be putting out a call for engagement and for volunteers for the advisory group that will inform sort of that big picture. As many people may know, we've been invited into the MSBA funding program for the Winter Hill, which is specifically for the Winter Hill, but they gave us the option that if we wanted to build a bigger building and combine the population of the Brown in it, that they would fund that bigger building. They would not fund 2 buildings, they would fund 1 building, but they would give us a bigger building. And certainly that question has an implication on the others. But in order to get to the root of that existential question, whether we want to preserve the Brown and Winter Hill as separate entities or if we would combine them, part of that community process, at least as a number of us see it, is also understanding the cultures in the buildings in the other schools. So this will be an opportunity for the other schools to voice, their desire for clean and carbon negative, healthy buildings in that larger mix. And I think if we can use it to sort of leverage that and have a larger conversation and try to advance a district-wide plan for an improvement rather than just answering that one question of Brown and Winter Hill, I think we should take that opportunity as a community to do that. So keep an eye out for that community process and for the calls of volunteers on that. Lastly, a point, the presentation that was made to the simultaneous committee of city council and school committee, there's no such thing as a joint committee. There are 2 committees that meet jointly on the funding. It was ambiguous to us, and again, as most of you probably know, I'm an engineer. I come at it from the engineering side. I have a good understanding of municipal finance, but a lot of the mechanics of those funding eligibilities aren't immediately apparent to me. They weren't immediately apparent to our city auditor on how a municipal school district could take advantage of some of those programs, particularly the federal tax incentive programs. Like, what is the mechanic of that? We do have a grants department that I think folks should reach out to and have some meetings with the grants department so they understand the mechanics of that funding so that we can make a little bit more headway on that. So those are the sort of three areas I think that folks can focus on.
Can I jump in
Yes.
here to piggyback off that funding aspect?
In one moment, Julia, I just wanted to flag for attendees that if you also have a question, a very specific question, please raise your hand and we can come to that as well. But go ahead, Julia.
Yeah, so I'm not an expert on the federal incentives or tax credits. I don't claim to be, but I am very, very well versed in them. And so I have been having conversations with grants and also with OSE to kind of just make sure everybody has a general understanding of it. And there are a few issues that we need to navigate and some questions that we do need to determine. Not so much around eligibility, but more so around just how lucrative these incentives actually are. So there are some provisions where, depending on the method of which you pay, the credits can be slashed more than 60%. And additionally, there are also some requirements that could actually increase the cost of the project to the point where it might not actually make sense for us to move forward with that incentive. Another large problem, not so much a problem, but just something that we really have to carefully navigate, is that a lot of these credits are definitely up in flux depending on the upcoming federal election. Former President Trump has made a point of saying that should he be reelected, he will be repealing the vast majority of the credits from the IRA. And the way that it works is that you have to apply for the credits during the tax season in which the project was constructed. And so if we were to start it this year, we'd be looking at submitting those tax forms next spring, in which case they might not even exist anymore. And so that's not necessarily a non-starter, but it is something we have to be aware of. And so we are having conversations to determine what mechanisms and if it's going to be lucrative for us. But again, there's definitely a lot of unknown around it, especially because the guidelines are not necessarily the most clear and constantly being updated and changed by the IRS.
Thank you. That's helpful. Courtney?
Yeah, thanks. This is all really helpful. I'm glad to be having a conversation together. Director Raish, could you kind of talk a little bit about what you have in the pipeline right now for work on existing schools? I know there's a few that have like kind of dramatic or big mechanical issues or chiller issues you're working through.
Yeah, through the chair. We're addressing a failure of the chiller at the Kennedy right now. So we are replacing that with a split unit that also does heating. It doesn't have enough power to heat the building totally, but it's going to help in the shoulder seasons. Typically, you know, almost all of our buildings have switchover points between the heating and cooling seasons. And typically you switch into heat earlier and fire up the gas boilers earlier. So, you know, at least, you know, in this one instance, we'll be able to handle the shoulder seasons with this unit in the Kennedy and not have to fire the boilers up until later. I mean, that's just sort of an example of how we can nibble away at the edges on the reactive side. We're trying to be less reactive. We've done retro commissioning at both the West and the Healy. We understand, you know, what systems are about ready to fail at both of those buildings. Healy is actually in pretty rough shape. And you know, we're looking at you know, what might need to be done in the immediate future on that. Our plan is to continue on with retro commissioning next at the East Argenziano and Capuano. And our project manager, Courtney Galloway, sort of pointed out that we hadn't done envelope assessments when we did the West and the Healy, and we were like, "You're absolutely right. We should do that." And so we've added it to the scopes that we will be starting next year. It's in our fiscal 25 plan to do the retro commissioning at the East Argenziano and Cap. We'll be adding the envelope assessments, and we would actually go back and do the envelope assessments for the West and the Healy at the same time. So, you know, it's mostly data gathering and understanding the systems. Certainly that would feed into a longer term plan, but you know, it's enabling for a longer term plan, but it's not quite the full thing as outlined in the you know, what the city council put forward, or you know, what's being advocated for here. I think that's a next logical step in the process.
And is there a time with that envelope assessment to then go back and resize mechanical systems at the buildings you're already starting to plan for?
Yeah,
That's where the benefit comes in.
Exactly. And we've really only looked at, we haven't taken a deep dive yet at the West anyway. The deeper dive was at the Healy, and I think once we understand what the envelope opportunities are there, we can take another look at what has to happen there at the Healy.
Thanks.
Super, thanks. So I want to try to wrap on this segment and move on. Not sure what our active next steps are, but Corey, just one quick clarification. The two asks you had in your presentation are a little bit different than the resolution that City Council passed. So, or do you see them differently, or do you see them as the same?
And when you say two asks, you're talking about the budget request?
I'm sorry, the two budget requests, yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the resolutions were, the budget requests were created, I should say, before working with the city council and school committee on those resolutions. But I think the core of the request regarding the study and timeline are essentially the same, in that it continue, you know, the point is to continue to reiterate a need for a clear timeline and plan from the city on its decarbonization and comprehensive retrofits of existing school buildings. The budget request for a project manager role was also, I believe, put forward by a few city councilors in their specific budget requests, just wasn't included in the resolutions that were passed by the city. Yeah.
Got it. Thank you. Open to thoughts from other commissioners on, oh, Jason, jump in, sorry.
Sure, I figured I would just hop in. Just sort of addressing some of the questions that came up around curriculum or statements. Certainly, Commissioner Kozlov brought up this idea, or that's directly from the slides, around prioritizing your historically marginalized communities. So we're actively working on this right now. So the quick context is what is so transformative is the contract language that was ratified, a couple years ago now. The contract language says, it's pretty vague, but basically it says the district will pull together a team to kind of review what's already happening in the schools and make recommendations to school committees, ed programs by June of 2025, which is when this current contract expires. We are currently finishing up the group, the Climate Change Curriculum Committee, didn't really initiate till about, I want to say, March or April of last year is when things started to really get cooking. And it was basically the way we've structured the committee is that every season or semester or so, it sort of reconstitutes. We have a handful of teachers who've pretty much stayed through, but we felt like organizing it in a way that had people committing for a year, like a full year or two, felt like maybe it would be too much of an ask. So we had a spring 2023 version, a summer version of the group, a fall winter, and we're currently in our spring 2024 group. And I can go into, I'm happy to set up additional time to kind of go into more detail about sort of what we've accomplished in the last year. But, in short, we did a needs assessment, had 90 staff respond last May, basically giving us a sense of sort of what's already happening. What's happening is kind of what we thought, which was things are sort of fragmented. It all depends on, do you have a teacher in a specific grade level who's really passionate, but we're not seeing consistency across, grade levels and whatnot. But there are some really key factors that are also happening in parallel. That will provide us with an opportunity to integrate climate change education into the school day. The idea that we're going to build something from scratch and present it to teachers and they're going to teach this, September to June is unrealistic. With all the demands that are on teachers and staff right now, really, I think the model that we're exploring is integration or sort of semester specific projects that build on each other basically every year. And the hope is to provide enough flexibility in the kinds of activities and units and projects that we're doing, certainly in the first few years, to give teachers multiple entry points. And at the same time, so there's science curriculum that's under review in the middle grades. There's a real push now for computer science education in classrooms. You're seeing the middle grades ELA curriculum is getting revamped. There's a big push for, there's a major focus now on civics education as part of the legislation that was passed a few years ago in grade 8 and 10. So there's all these, it's this like fertile time right now to incorporate and integrate all kinds of experiences for students, not just sitting at a desk, but getting out into the field. So, Mystic River Watershed Association, for example, came to us and said, we have money for buses. So, the plan next year is, we want every single fifth grader working, at the Mystic at some point during the school year. And so also tapping into this incredible network of industry partners in the area. I'm thinking like Form Energy and folks like that who are working on, solutions that have global implications. And figuring out, what are they looking for in a future employee, leveraging the new wind, power program that's over at Tufts. I mean, we're like saturated in all these incredible resources. And so part of the big goal, the big push next year is figuring out, I mean, we have all these amazing players. So where does everything sort of fit together and how can we create, the most incredible experience for our students? And then there's a way into the home too, or into wherever it is the students and families are living. So we see parents and guardians as a vital part of this as well. There's a program in, you know, I want to say South Boston, Bioversity, where they, you know, all you need is a high school diploma and you can get trained up and get into an entry-level job in the life sciences. And so looking at ways to create something similar right here in Somerville so that folks, you know, can leave Somerville High School ready to go. We're blessed with a comprehensive high school, meaning we have, you know, your more traditional sort of academic track, for a lack of a better term, and our career technical education program, which has electrical, has automotive, has HVAC, advanced manufacturing. So these are industries that are very much a part of the sort of the climate forward movement. And so tapping into those programs, figuring out ways to expand them, having more students off site, working in internships. So there's, again, we're blessed to have all of these incredible resources. Now, the goal is to pull together a crew of stakeholders, parents, community organizations, higher ed partners, industry folks, to kind of figure out how it all works together, workforce development. And that is going to be our focus next year. It sort of happened, I wouldn't call it serendipitous, but folks were doing the good work and we all sort of came together. Emily Sullivan, who's on the call, Jennifer Mancia from Workforce Development, and a whole host of other folks are sort of laser focused on this. And the goal is to spend a lot more time together going forward and tapping into all these great resources and community partners to sort of figure out what this is going to look like. And so it's incredibly exciting. There's, you know, as you can tell, there's all sorts of limitations around the physical plant and figuring out those logistics. I certainly can't speak to those. When it comes to the sort of the curricular side and the experience that students will have in the classroom, that's something we can move on very quickly. And there isn't a better time to do it than now because of all the ripe sort of opportunities in the curriculum department, particularly in middle grades 6, 7, 8, to really spark this work. And so, Corey, we're looking at hosting a meeting on June 6th. I'll send you an email after this. Let's have you come on board. Anyone else who's a part of this commission, we'd love to have you. It's, we were lucky. Jen Mancia came to us. I'll be brief and I'll stop. Hey, I've got these funds. It's part of workforce development. Let's spark a climate jobs initiative. And so she brought it to Emily, who brought it to me, and together we ran this very, pretty straightforward April break program. We served almost 50 kids, brought together some amazing partners. That report will be ready soon. I'll certainly share it with all of you. And grades, 5, 6, 7, 8 at the high school, lots of great stuff. But what it provided us with is what you'd call, like in a science lesson or classroom, like an anchoring phenomenon. It gave us all something to sort of sink our teeth into instead of sitting around like, what is this theoretical jobs initiative? Like we now have this cohort of middle grade students and a whole host of partners who are excited about this work. And so, we're just super excited about the progress so far, and we're going to need all of you in some way, shape, or form in the next year or so to contribute to what we expect to be this sort of growing framework, right? I think at this point, only New Jersey has a fully comprehensive pre-K to 12, grade 12 set of frameworks around climate change. And I'm curious how much of Sandy and some of those other bigger storms led to the creation of that. I think they released that maybe in 2019 or 2020. So I would love for Somerville to spark that for Massachusetts. I mean, it's already happening. There's legislation already around interdisciplinary approaches to climate change education that are on people's desks right now. So the youth have made a ton of progress as well. And so having them, a part of this, obviously, or joining them, honestly, where they are right now, is another major goal. So
awesome.
Appreciate the time.
Thank you, Jason. Hopefully it won't take a superstorm to get us to move. But it sounds like things are moving already. So that's great. But I am going to move us along, but I do want to offer up if any commissioners have thoughts on any actions the commission should take based on this discussion.
Perhaps one thing we could take is to have these topics be regularly touched in on the commission, and we could determine at that time what's the best use of that conversation, and if having this broader array of city staff on this call is really productive and helpful. So perhaps I could also include that.
Sounds good. All right.
And then everyone write to the mayor in the next 4 days about budget priorities.
Thank you, Corey. Thank you, Director Rach and Jason. Also, thank you. You guys y'all can drop. You're welcome to stay. Eric, you're welcome to stay as well. OSC staff, you're all adults. You can figure out whether to stay or not in the next 10 minutes. We will try to move through a couple more agenda items. We won't get through everything, and that's probably okay. I did want to bring up the Climate Forward launch, just an event debrief, first of all, and then we have the webinar to talk about. But yeah, anyone want to share thoughts on Climate Forward launch? Somebody already started before we.
I started earlier before I just was talking a lot, so I was trying to wait. But I just want to say that I thought the Climate Forward update launch was a great event. It was a lot of fun, great energy. The commissioned art was really exciting, and the little art stations. The DJ was great. It felt dynamic, and it was exciting to have this plan out there and to hear the mayor commit to a few things, particularly around schools and also about our commission. It sounds like that's one of our agenda items later, but expanding it. And we've been talking a lot about what our charter or what our makeup is and what we do. And so it was nice to see there was some movement on those things. So, I think there's lots of work to be done to get it all to happen, but it was exciting to be there. Good work, really good work by the city staff.
Yeah, I echo everything Commissioner Costo just said. I think it was also good to have like a good range of age groups in there. I met and talked with a lot of young people who were entering this space through art. They learned about Somerville Climate Forward because they were invited in to be the artists here. And so that, I think it had a lot of impact on bringing new voices into the room. And I think we can always do more there, but I think it was a good first step. I'm curious if, I know the point of the event was not to go through all of the action items. So I'm curious about the next steps for now that people are jazzed. What is the plan for making sure everybody knows about, BE1 and all of the different steps that the city's going to take? So maybe that's the next agenda item, but I'm curious about.
That is the next.
Yeah.
I think that's the next agenda item. But we might as well just roll right into that. Webinar, Thursday.
Larry, do you want me to speak a little bit about that?
If you wouldn't mind.
Sure thing. And I just want to give kudos to Naomi Gross, our community engagement specialist, who really did a phenomenal job visioning and coordinating everything for the Climate Forward launch. So Naomi, you rock. Thank you so much. I think we had between 200 and 250 people. I'm not a great counter, but that was my estimate. So thank you for everyone who participated and who supported that effort. We have a webinar plan and just like you said, that was more of a celebratory vibe. So the webinar is really more of a content based. And so our goal is to review in more depth, the content of the plan, and then specifically go over how community members impacted the final actions from the 5 topic areas. So we'll go into some of the technical background, the planning process, engagement process, then focus on what the actions are and why they are that way based on like community input, staff input, city input, etc. And that Naomi and I are also following up individually with all of the community organizations and groups that we had met with during the plan update process. Yes, we will record the webinar and then we'll post it online. But Naomi and I are following up with all of the groups that we met with to inform Climate Forward. And so we're offering to do like one-on-one meetings or go to those organization meetings to also review Climate Forward. And then we started conversations today with Somerville's Office of Immigrant Affairs to speak in more depth about how we're going to bring this information to maybe community members who weren't as involved in the planning process or the update process, like non-English speaking communities. And I think a lot of that will revolve around plain language, transparency, accountability, and how we're letting the community know that they impacted the plan. And then just, some pretty basic relationship building and education. But more details will come on that in the future or in the coming months.
Do you need any contributions from commissioners for that webinar on Thursday, or you've got it all? This isn't like we have 10 breakouts planned and need anything. Okay.
It's going to be pretty straightforward, like a bread and butter webinar with a Q&A portion. But I do recognize that we don't have much time tonight to go over the plan in detail. So I encourage anyone to reach out to myself or Naomi if you want to go through the plan in more detail. We're happy to chat with you about it.
Sounds good. Any further questions on the Climate Forward launch or the event or the webinar? And I offer that up to our participants as well. Just raise your hand. Um, 4 minutes left. Apologies. So yes, Christine and I have been working on, mostly Christine has been working on some proposed language for an ordinance revision, and there are probably 2 areas in particular where we probably could use some further input from y'all, and it won't be tonight, but we'll find some other mechanism to do that. One is just around composition. So we've put together a straw person, perhaps, of like a commission of 13 with different categories of I don't want to say representation, but of different backgrounds, sitting on the geographic backgrounds, different age groups, things like that, to draw in some more diverse thinking. But love to just sort of get your thoughts on that when we are able to get that out. And then the other is around the function of the purpose of the commission, I think, which has certainly de facto changed since its formation, when there was no OSE. I don't know how long ago was it, 12 years ago? However long ago it was. And so because of that shift, there's some thinking around like, what is the purpose of the commission? What, how can we be most helpful going forward? And would love to get your thoughts on that as well. So those are 2 areas that we in particular will be seeking some input, and hopefully in advance of next meeting, we'll get a draft out for everyone to take a look at.
I can work with
Did you say that?
For us, go.
Sorry, Courtney, go ahead.
I don't know if you said this, but I thought that the mayor noted that this would go before the city council in June. Was that what I heard? And is that the intent?
June. Was it June? I would have to, perhaps Emily knows the answer to that.
I think it's in the fall. I think we're waiting till budget season and stuff, so it'll be fall. But from my understanding, we have to update the ordinance, which requires a city council approval, though.
Right.
I think Larry's saying the commission will be involved in that draft that gets presented to city council.
Great.
I was under the impression that it would be going during the fall as well, because even if we send it right now with budget season going on, city council won't have the opportunity to look at it.
Yeah, fair enough. I do want to, we have the minutes to approve, and also, I do want to acknowledge, Lindsay Luke's query at the beginning of the session, regarding the, resolution passed by city council on the clean heat. I believe it was. I had it in front of me and now I lost it. I do not have the name of it in front of me at present, but I think that's something that we should put back on our agenda to take a look at for next meeting as well.
That's something that I've also been digging into a little bit with Christine, and we're going to be looping our IGA team in on the loop end as well. And so by next meeting, we should be able to talk about it a little bit more in detail.
Perfect. Thank you. Sorry about that.
Larry, can you just repeat the question? I think I missed it I missed it earlier, so just for the minutes.
Yes, so Lindsay Luke was inquiring about whether the commission was going to take action on the resolution passed by city council on, when was it, April 25th, in support of an act relative to the future of clean heat in the Commonwealth and an act establishing a moratorium on new gas system expansion. Sorry, was that too fast? No.
Commissioner Washburn, if you just like write down as much of that as you got, I can find the docket and everything to put that information into the minutes.
And also my bad for posting I posted the wrong link because I misheard and thought it was the May 9th resolution that was passed. So my apologies.
It's all good. I found it. It's all good. And lastly, we have the minutes to our April meeting, which were distributed. Does anyone need a moment to review them?
Sharing my screen just in case.
If not, I will entertain a motion to accept the minutes as submitted.
I'll second that.
You would have to move it first.
Oh, I will move it.
I'll
Moved
second.
by Liza, second by Ari. All in favor, physically raise your hand. Motion passes unanimously. I almost said motion passes anonymously, which is not correct. And is there any other new business? All right.
If I could ask, at the last meeting, the minutes note that we were going to talk about the building subcommittee and the composition.
Yeah,
Is that
I'm sorry.
running-
You're right. So we did say we would talk about the committees, and as part of the ordinance review, we were also thinking about the composition in relation to committees. We talked about the current committees, which were buildings, outreach, policy, and administration. There's actually this should be another matter of discussion when we talk about the ordinance review, is how should our committees be structured going forward. So we could talk about committees now until when the ordinance gets passed, or we could just defer till that point. What do you guys think? Anyone?
I mean, if we really think it would be the fall, maybe it's fine to wait, but if we think it's going to go on 9 or 12 months, it would probably be.
I don't think it can
Have
go
something
on
in
that
the
long.
meantime. Okay.
Yeah, it has to move quicker.
It's fine.
I think it's fine too.
All right. With that, thank you.
Sorry again for being late. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everyone.
All good.
Bye.
Thank you guys. Have a great night. See you next month.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.